Hi, I'm Sherry Ballou.
And I'm Paul Tindiscotta.
This is my visual aid. Oops. Infants, school age, and adolescents. My name is Rebecca Tindiscotta, and I'd like to talk to you tonight about why I think that boys are easier to raise than girls. Raising a child from birth to 18 months is the hardest job a person can ever undertake. It's also the most challenging and rewarding job imaginable. Nothing can describe the feeling of first seeing your child for the first time. And the reality hits when you take them home. Steve Biddulph, in Raising Boys' Achievement in Schools, states that femininity and masculinity, that researchers report that they feel that it's fixed, it's just biology. He feels that it's a process. It's a process begun when you first bring that baby home and start by their parents. He feels that dressing a girl in pink and putting bows in her hair, or dressing a boy in blue and having them play with trucks impacts them and it helps describe the femininity and masculinity. And Anita Sethi, in The Real Difference Between Boys and Girls, agrees to that in some part, but she also thinks that boys and girls are just hardwired differently. She says that boys are in motion. She says that girls are observers. Boys are constantly in motion, like to be in motion, will do things, and boys are fearless. Boys are less likely to startle at infant age. Not only than girls are at the same age, they're also less likely to respond to their caregiver's face when they're doing something they're not supposed to, more than girls. And boys also have a higher incidence of going to the ER than girls do, not only as an infant, but they're all the way through their childhood. Girls like one-on-one contact with one person. Boys love a crowd. Boys are also slower to talk, and talk less, reach milestones later, and according to Cheryl Irwin in her book, Parents' Guides to Raising Boys, they're also less likely to get potty trained, sometimes not until 3 or 4 years old. Have I convinced you yet? Okay, let's recap. From birth to 5, boys are fearless, they're constantly in motion, they're less likely to respond to a face expression, they get potty trained later than girls, they talk later and less, and they'll try anything, and they love a crowd. No, not yet. Let's talk about elementary age. These characteristics already discussed are that boys are motion-driven, meaning they be in constant motion. They love crowds, they're fearless, and they won't stop a behavior based on a look. And add to that what Paula Spencer says in the article, Is It Hard to Raise Boys Than Girls?, that boys don't hear as well as girls, and not only at this age, but it continues on all the way through adulthood. Girls also hear a high frequency, and they are able to differentiate critical speech discrimination. And they're also more likely to respond to discipline strategies, such as praise and warnings. Also, once boys hit school age, they're more likely to be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity. Okay, same list. Now let's add not listening, hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder. Haven't convinced you yet? Moving on to adolescence. Remember the behaviors the boys have shown since birth? Now is the time the boys, not only the playing field equalized, but I feel the boys now take the advantage. To recap, boys like motion. They like to be in motion, to observe things in motion, and to talk about things in motion. This is their time. Sports, cars, electronics. As a parent, you finally have some leverage. Sports, cars, and electronics. Most boys want an audience. They want to be in a crowd, whether they're their peers, performing someplace in the crowd, or just being a member of that crowd. They're still fearless and very physical. Boys are in the moment. They will get angry and physical, but then of course they get over it as soon as they're finished. For the most part, boys this age strive to find themselves and stay there. Once they find their comfort zone, whether in sports or relationships or academics, they tend to settle in and hardly venture out. They have learned to tune out their parents because they don't hear what's being said in that high, shrill voice anyway. And they've also learned to keep the very few words they use at home on sports, cars, and electronics. Now let's talk about girls. Remember the charming characteristics the girls had since infancy? We know they tend to be more observers than emotion-driven. They like the attention of one person over a crowd. They're cautious and distrustful of people and situations. Their hearing is more sensitive to critical speech, and they're very sensitive to looks of disapproval. And finally, girls like to talk. These combination of girl traits up until now may have given parents the feeling that girls are easier to raise than boys. But when these same traits that were so endearing as a toddler are supersized now by hormones, they take on a whole different light. There's very little a parent can do when a teenager who only wants the attention of one person they can't get are now overly sensitive to the look of their peers and have suddenly become distrustful of their parents. These girls still like to talk, but only to other teenage girls. And these girls have their own teenage drama. When a parent speaks to their teenagers, the girls still listen, just as carefully as they did when they were younger, but they'll now to reinforce that their parent doesn't understand them or to state their point of view. In conclusion, I feel that boys are easier to raise than girls because boys may have been difficult for the first 10 to 12 years, but just when they got too big to pick up and carry to a corner, they finally find their niche. Girls may have hit their stride in the difficulty level now, just as parents began to take their behaviors for granted. But like in any race, it's not how well you do when the race begins, but how you make it across the finish line.